Okay, hello everybody. We are live. Wait, I'm seeing a pop-up message, so that's fine.
Yeah, I clicked something. Yeah.
Oh, I won't be able to stream live to my X channel because I'm not paying Elon Musk any money.
Of course.
Sorry. Well, here we are, hopefully live on Rumble and YouTube. I'm Zara from the Collapse Life podcast. I'm really happy to be joined by Limina and David and by all of our viewers who are so far zero. So maybe we'll just give it a second.
Yep, we're live. I see it live on my end. So, yep, we're live on my Rumble too.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on mine now too. That's great.
Well, we're live. We should probably just start the conversation. We'll welcome people when they join. And if not, we will record this and then people can watch it back later.
Yeah.
You bet.
So the genesis of this idea was to talk about how we are just inundated and walking ourselves into a technocratic future because we are so addicted to our digital devices. And awareness is always this first step to breaking an addiction. So knowing that that is the case, we wanted to just come together and talk about it and talk about what we can do about it. And it seems more appropriate than ever, given this is the week of the craziest election cycle that any of us can remember. And it's been just torturous having to listen to and hear and read all the things that have been out there. So this is a great time to disconnect and unplug a bit. And the irony of having this conversation online is not lost on us. Thanks, Darren Mossman, for pointing it out to us. But it is only because of this amazing technology that we were even able to meet each other. Although we're all three Canadian and David and I used to live within spitting distance of each other, we would not have known about each other if not for social media and the internet. So that's a wonderful thing. Do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Go ahead, David.
I'm David from the Freedom Conversation podcast. There it is behind me. I discuss transhumanism quite often of late. It's hard not to. That's why I have this robot converging with the human. And I don't know what else to say, but drop by. We talk about a variety of things. Human health, and the technology merging with humanity and that whole issue. And I like to cover that stuff. So drop by anytime. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Limina. Thanks for having me, Zara. I really appreciate the work you're doing. And I also appreciate that you did all the work to set this up. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
I have a small channel called the Human Responsibilities Tribunal. And I also have a one-on-one counseling, resiliency building business based on my years as a social worker, which I've stepped away from mostly just because I actually really like to help people based on them, not based on ideologies and other things. So mostly what I'm focused on is helping people become more resilient to their internal selves and then the external world. Because I do think you're right. We are in the middle of a collapsing civilization. And so we can scream and cry about why that's happening a lot, or we can really fortify ourselves because this is what's happening. So
yeah, that is really the whole point of Collapse Life. It's, we know things are changing. Things always change. It's not a big surprise. I mean, Collapse Life isn't here to tell you that, but it's to say that we can either bury our head in the sand and pretend that things are not changing as fast as they are, or we can face up to them, change what we can, or control the things that are within our control, and at least then make plans for how we want to live in this changing world, and where we want to draw lines and where we want to kind of stand firm on things. So yeah,
right. And this isn't the first time that societies have collapsed or will collapse. And the story of Noah isn't God said the world is going to come to an end, and I sat around on the internet and talked to all my friends on Facebook about how it was going to end, it was, okay, so now what? How do we live through this?
Exactly.
How do we keep going forward? Instead of walking out, how do we walk on?
Exactly. That is exactly the point. So
Yep,
civilizations have come and gone
that's right.
innumerable times before, obviously. But we as humans still carry on. And thanks to David, we will continue to be humans and also not walk
Yeah.
ourselves into some sort of terrifying future where we are something other than human. So yeah, I think all of our ideas and perspectives really kind of converge and come together in a great way. And this
And
is
with
just
collapse, I just want to say just about collapse. Yeah. When things collapse, like think of a chair or a table, they split apart and they go down. Now we have a psychological and ideological fracture in our world, don't we? Since COVID.
yeah.
I think since
Uh,
before COVID, even
Since
maybe.
before, I think COVID just
yeah,
highlighted
true.
where some of the fault lines were.
Yeah, it's so acute
Mhm.
now, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyway, that came to my mind about just
Yeah.
the word collapse. I
The
just
word
vision
collapse
the
is a funny
split.
one. We talk about a lot on the podcast and on the blog because it's been depicted by Hollywood as this cataclysmic overnight disaster. One day everything's fine and the kids are riding their bikes home from school, and then the next day the Statue of Liberty is in New York Harbor and everything is dust. And sometimes those things happen, but not usually on the grand scale that Hollywood would let us know. But really, collapse is much more just this slow chipping away at things, this almost imperceptible erosion of how things used to be. Just kind of things change, they disappear, they stop being maintained, people move away, nobody looks after the homes anymore, the jobs go away, the school closes, and that's kind of how collapse happens. And it can happen in a pretty short timeline, but it's usually not overnight. Anyway.
Mhm. Well, the health system surely has collapsed. And by health system, I mean the human health system, the individual human health system. There's a lot of things coming in this agricultural industry. That industry is broken. It has collapsed, in my opinion. Prove me wrong, somebody.
Well,
know?
I think also that it's very possible that the whole economic system collapsed in 2009 and that it's just been sort of propped up and some rules changed to make it look like it hasn't. But I'm when I talk to people, I guess what I think is there's a lot of talk right now about mushrooms and the medicinal properties of them, but they're also great lesson learners. So, people would talk about mycelium and mushrooms as though, they signify death, but they don't really. They signify sort of almost a reincarnation, right? An ability to take a pile of shit and make it something great and bloom from it and take the resources out of it and spread it around to let other things grow. And I just think at the end of a forest fire is rejuvenation, right? We have to remember that this is how the ecosystem for everything works, right? It ramps up and then it falls. It ramps up and then it falls. This idea of this balanced homeostasis is inaccurate. We live in a wax and wane, and that includes us, right? And so there's lots of signs in the world that this is also just what happens. Humans be humaning in the world. We're still just part of the natural world. It still runs us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the aspects of this conversation around the sort of digital overload is, I think, that we're moving or being moved farther and farther away from our natural world. I mean, you two both live in very beautiful natural environments. I can see behind you, Lumina, that was your sunset yesterday. So you live in a very beautiful place. I know David lives in a very beautiful place. And part of the reason why we loved living where we lived right down the road from David was because of that, because you can't help but be reminded and inspired by the trees and the birds and the stars and all of that. And that, maybe not for all, but certainly for us, it just was a constant reminder of how kind of small and insignificant we are in the grand cosmos of things. And when you live in a city, it doesn't have the same dynamic. You become your own universe, and everything that you need or do is all about you. And I think that does play into this whole digital addiction as well, because people are now kind of hooked to their phones. The phones are always feeding back to them about them. Nobody looks up at the sky to see the stars when you live in a city. You're just looking straight ahead or off to the side. So,
well, I would say the phones in particular, and then maybe even going further into that, like social media and stuff, has really tapped into the negative sides of the human algorithm. I guess what Jung would call the shadow self. It's really, I mean, that's the side that seems to click too, that seems to click and get into Facebook status fights and stuff with people. It seems to have really tapped into that negative shadow self of self-centeredness, that narcissistic, that really me look at stuff, and just saying things to people. It really has shut down our empathy for each other, that's for sure.
I call it the digital ego. Digital ego. What constitutes an ego? This is for people to think about on their own time. It's a whole nother podcast, isn't it? And I just wrote down on that topic of digital ego, I wanted to bring that up. That's interesting. When I first heard of Facebook or social media, whatever, 20 years ago, I thought, that's weird. I dabbled with it a little, and I was thinking, this is just digital ego. And that word just stuck with me for so long. And I guess just to follow up, I wrote down, what are the constituents of ego? And then you get into ego's operations in your life. And there's this emotional thing, ideological thing, our self-identity. Who are we? What are we? And the world outside. So obviously the ego, it's a huge psychological thing we're not going to get into, but this digital ego, and then the avatar. The avatar is becoming more important than your own God-given flesh. I'm seeing it happen, and I'm feeling it myself. What do you think of any of these ideas? Have I gone too far? Digital ego.
Well, I think it's a two. Well, it's a multifaceted issue, but one of the things that when you think a lot about your avatar, I don't think I think it's fair to say that a lot of people don't feel really great about themselves right now, in a time where self-help and self-esteem is supposed to be, the number one. We've tricked people with participation trophies and stuff, but we haven't really tricked them, right? We've given them all the awards and the no failing marks, and I think deep down in people's cores, they know when they haven't done things, and they don't feel good about getting applause or admiration or respect in a way that they haven't earned. So I don't think people do feel good about themselves. So I think it's easy to escape into an avatar. And what was that Philip K. Dick book that they made into a movie about that? With
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Made into Blade Runner? Or was it
no,
a different
it was
one?
another
Maybe?
one.
A different one. Oh, really?
And it was. I'm gonna find it. No, I'll find it while somebody else is talking. But it was really good because it was, this couple had actually gone through a lot, and it was so clear that they just couldn't face each other in the real world, so that they escaped into their android selves for safety. I think it's clear that people, the more fearful we become, and stay in this crisis, oh my God, the sky is falling, the more likely we will, the more open we'll be to suggestions that are downright evil.
Yes, fear, absolutely. It's probably the most powerful motivator of really self-harmful behavior. And I haven't read it yet, but there's a book by Michael Nels, The Indoctrinated Brain.
Yeah.
Have you guys read that? He talks about how
no, but
he talks about
sorry.
how the continuous fear response actually shrinks the hippocampus of our brain. It actually starts making a physiological change in the matter of our brain. And that is exactly what he's saying in his book. The thesis of his book is that's exactly what they inflicted on us during the COVID crisis. And with a smaller hippocampus, there's less, I think it's, joy and relaxation. I mean, there are certain, Livina, maybe you know but more about this than I, but there are certain human emotions that center from that part of the brain, and we are limited by a smaller hippocampus because the fear has actually shrunk that part of our brain.
Well, and they're actually saying too that there's changes in your thymus gland too, around your immune system and what have you. I mean, there's a lot of theories. I think science is dead, so I believe what I've seen with my own eyes. But one of the things I've noticed too, and one of the things I studied way back when was the terror management theory. That essentially a lot of the major motivations in our lives is just fear of death and trying to get away from it. The movie is actually called Surrogates. I can't believe I didn't remember that.
I think there's a lot of things happening to human beings right now on levels that we are grappling to even understand. And one of them is, here's a question for the listener. Are you afraid of your own mind? Are you afraid of your own mind and heart?
Well,
The
and
technology is making that happen to people. It's happening to me, I have a garden here. Listen to this. I have a garden here. Look, this is my backyard, okay? I live on a lake. This is my backyard here. It's beautiful. I could leave the cell phone right here in this house, go out into my 2-acre garden and have a great time. No, I find it very difficult. Today, I went and raked some leaves and I was like, I'm going to leave the thing here because I was thinking about this podcast. Let's leave the cell phone here. Let's go out there and just be with my own mind, smell the air, rake the leaves, get in tune with nature. 20 minutes, I was in the house, plugging in the earphones, listening to a podcast. I'm a victim, my friends, also. But I'm here to try to help if I can. I have one foot in the digital world because I've started a podcast 1 year ago almost. It's my 1 year anniversary. But I also have one foot in the idyllic homesteader life of Nova Scotia. Yeah. So I'm an interesting case study, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just talking.
I mean, and again, the idea of this live stream is not that the three of us have answers to these questions.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, people.
It's really to kind of just hash it out and see what we can learn from each other. And hopefully if others can join in from the audience, maybe they have questions or maybe they have answers.
Yeah.
Well, I think it can be split into, and we talked about this quickly yesterday, is when I think about it, I think it's a two-issue problem, although it's probably more multifaceted than that. But the biggest issues are physiologically, what are all these screens? And that's not just your phone and your computer, but also your television now, right? Even you go into a doctor's office or any waiting room and there's 4 screens into it. You go into a restaurant and there's screens in it, what the physiological effects that's having on your mind, right? It feels like they're all playing on that VLT every 10 seconds. Something exciting excites your mind and shoots your dopamine levels up, and then we have all of that. We have the hormone effects from having blue light all the time. We have the sleep effects from having blue light all the time. We have the carbohydrate metabolism problems from our bodies thinking it's summer all the time. So we have all the physiological problems from the physiological part of the screens. And then we've got the whole other psychological side of, have we usurped all our opinions and decision making to some commentator that we really like? Are we constantly feeding that terror management or that fear that you're talking about that's having physiological effects? Are we constantly feeding that? All the algorithms are based on the human condition, right? But it's like the human condition on steroids. So though I acknowledge that a lot of this stuff is based on a natural human algorithm of socialization, it's the one on steroids, right? And it's that really negative tribal eat the brain of your enemy one. Maybe not even that nice. So it's kind of, I saw it in those two problems. And then so today when I was out just collecting deadfall around my property, I actually lamented. I've never been a big screen person. I think I watched 20 hours of TV last year. And maybe I probably watch as much TV in a decade as people do in a week or a month, so I've not ever really been big on screens or video games or anything. But then I was actually lamenting. Remember when FOMO came out, fear of missing out? Gosh, I would kill to have that time back where a teenager was like, I got to get off this screen. I'm going to miss a party. I'm afraid I'm going to miss out. I'm afraid I'm going to miss out on, that guy I like or that girl I like, or I'm afraid I'm going to miss out on that big basketball shot if I don't like.
This brings us to the cultural implications of all of this, which is so serious to me. Think about it. The food's bad, the information's bad. It's like all these things are bad. And I'm losing my train of thought, but the cultural implications of this information technological storm surely is so serious that I think that we don't even fully understand it yet. I'm just going on an intuitive feeling now, really. I'm no expert, but I got on social media 1 year ago because I started this podcast to speak out against the New World Order. Okay, fine. And when I first got on Twitter, I was in multiple conversations constantly for about a week, say, just like, oh, I'm starting a podcast, trying to get followers. And I did the whole thing. It was like, and comment on this, comment on that. And you're getting replies here, replies there. And I realized this is idle chat, idle gossip, idle talk, useless nonsense, hyperbolic comments, trying to get feedback. And I was like, my brains are fucking scrambled. Whoa. Like this is very powerful, this stuff. And some people, they dive in and they stay there. I see them. They're out there. They're constantly going. They have hundreds of thousands of followers. They can't stop. They can't stop.
And the big joke is it's mostly bots. It's not even other people you're talking to. You just think
Limina, you got to tell us, Limina, about the dead internet theory, maybe, but maybe that's another thing. But does that play into this at all?
Well, in a way, it probably does. I mean, the one thing I was going to say is just going back to that idea of fear and like when we were young, you would be at home and you would have that fear of missing out, but also that your home would be a sort of safe haven unless you lived in a unsafe environment.
Not mine.
But, it wasn't. Well, so no. But for many people, anyway, for myself anyway, when you were at home, you felt somewhat safe from the things outside. But now for kids, that's not the case because the bullies are in the computer. They're in the screen and they're all around. They're always with you. You can't really hide from them no matter where you go. There's no real safe place to go to get away from.
But there is. I mean, both me and my husband, one of the reasons we've come together is we found a home literally outside, out in the natural world. And it's super centering. I know people talk about grounded, and David knows what I feel about the love and light thing, you know. I think it's just it's almost too childish, but you go outside and you make your home inside yourself, and you make your home in nature, and you understand that nature is not often this nice frilly thing, and you can I guess you can escape in it too. But kids don't even have that. They don't go out and play even. They don't go out and play. School is a total disgusting shit show, and I hate it when people say, well, they've got to socialize. It's like, never again after you leave school will you socialize with people who are only your age, where you can only read and talk about certain things, and there's some person that you know just got married because her husband did everything she wanted that's in charge of you, you know.
Regarding kids and culture, here we go again with the culture. I can't stop on this culture thing lately. I'm thinking about it constantly. The kids, man, like, look at us. I'm 46. You guys look maybe in that area, and we were not born with this thing in our face. This thing right here, the cell phone.
That's it.
I hate
There's
it when I see
25-year-olds now.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just, kids of the future, cultural issue, cultural concerns. What do you think of this now? How, like I said, I have 1 foot out, 1 foot in. I can kind of deal with the struggle because I know what it's like to climb trees and live a normal fucking life before. I'm going to temper my language. Used to live in Nova Scotia. You know how we are here. Sailors.
I still live in New York, so never mind.
Tell me about the kids. What are you guys thinking?
My language.
Yeah, no, I think it's terrible. I mean, I guess it probably started with our generation, with TV being the babysitter for so many kids, but I think it's worse now. And I mean, there are kids who don't. They have Alexa in the home, so you can just speak to Alexa and she'll search the internet for you. And so, you're sitting around doing your homework in the kitchen. You don't have to look anything up or think of what is the answer to you just say, Alexa, what is the answer to the question on my homework? So I think it is changing the way they think, and changing the way they interact with the world. I mean, I think you're right, Lemon. I think it's very concerning that in the interest of so-called safety, we've buttoned up these kids and kept them indoors because things are dangerous outside and nature might hurt you or whatever it is. I don't know. Yeah. I don't have children, so I don't know what the instinct is
and it might hurt you. And it's funny, I just had my friend Larry on, who actually died and was brought back. And I met him the year after he died, and he went back. He goes back every year to where he died and then skis the hill again, right? And one of the things that came up is trying not to die and living aren't the same things.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That was a great interview. I'll plug that for you. I listened to you talk to that guy, that old fella who died on a ski hill and came back to life. He's the wisdom is unfathomable. Let's talk about processing emotions. Go ahead.
It's probably in the same line, David, but trying not to die is living in fear, and living is
terror management theory.
It's just accepting what happens and knowing that at some point you will die, and maybe this is the moment, but maybe it's not. And so just kind of being there, being present and open to what's happening.
Here's what's interesting to me is we can clearly see the brain changes, the eye changes, the attention changes, the behavioral changes, the social changes. We can clearly see that children, people talk about COVID, but it was happening before, where children are not picking up social cues, right? And so we can say autism, but, really diagnoses are supposed to be made like that when it's like, oh yeah, they have autism, but you could just take away the screen and re-socialize them, right? I've heard another advertisement, and because I listen to so little stuff with advertisements now, I'm really conscious of them. And it was the optometrist of Alberta, and it was pretty much, we know that screens are taking a toll on your kids' eyes, but don't worry, we have solutions for that. And guess what? It's not taking away screens. It's glasses and contacts. And it's interesting to me that we can see it you don't need a whole lot of science and research and projects and experts. I'm tired of experts. I don't believe them anyway now. You know, that we're not taking action. It feels like it's mirroring the obesity epidemic. It's like, oh, my kid's overweight and they're on these diabetes and they can't sit still, and it's like, well, what are they eating? Well, you know, if I don't give him those hot dogs and Kraft dinner every day, he throws a fit. And it's
Right.
like, oh,
Yeah.
well,
This is
you know, I'll
technology.
just stir the
Literally,
pot.
technology is not just messing with people. It's not just breaking our everything. It's colonizing us. You understand? Ideology starts, and then the physical changes will come. I like to think about the missionaries in South America as a good example. You send ideology in, and I'm not picking apart religion or anything. This is just an example. Ideology goes first. You spread messages, people begin to believe, and then changes come to the culture, changes come to things. Now I'm thinking transhumanism here, and I'm taking it to the next level. We are becoming colonized by ideologies of all kinds, with the emotional regulation issues that are coming through all of this technological information. We're picking sides, the blue, the red, and and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is part of the colonization process, I think. You're getting too deep into these things. And the Apple Watch, that's just the beginning. We're getting closer and closer. I had to come inside. I told you, get that cell phone, stick it in the things in my ears, and go back out and rake my goddamn leaves. This is technology infesting me, colonizing me. And people need to really take a step back and think information consumption. Take it as a contemplation. Information consumption. When you turn on the damn thing, you're consuming.
Yeah.
Be careful.
And you're consuming, like, I think it was Joe Rogan that said it's processed information. Like, you're not getting cheese, you're getting a cheese slice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not getting fresh bread, you're getting Triscuits. You are not getting, you're getting highly curated entertainment. I wouldn't even say information, because we don't even know what's real. And I think people need to start thinking back. It was only 100 years ago that you didn't really, well, let's go back maybe a bit further, 150 years ago, that you didn't know what was happening in the Ukraine. And guess what? You made it through it. You didn't know
you didn't know who the prime minister was, too. 150 years ago, it's like, who's the prime minister? I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Whoever, you know, but you did know who you voted in to go, that was in your community to go, and they had to look you in the eyeballs when they came back. So it's really interesting to me that people can't even look back to the very recent past to realize, you know what, we were okay without industrial schools. We were okay without this weird Rockefeller medicine. You know, for the amount that people make fun of naturopaths, that's what kept us alive for the first 1,000,000 years. You've been in charge for 100 years, and now we're all sick.
There you go.
I wouldn't pat your back too much. I don't need science to see that. I got eyeballs, right? So it's very interesting to me how quickly we disconnected from that past of things that were okay and super tangible. And I wonder if, you know, a really great book that I recommend is The Gift of Fear. And the one thing the guy says is the first thing you should do is stop watching the news, because if it ain't local, it really doesn't have much to do with you.
Is that Gavin de Becker's book?
Yes. It's a good one. I think it's still relevant. And I guess the last thing I would say is, in the 90s, before the internet even really got big, they started having a branch of anthropology called cyborg anthropology, where they were already trying to measure the cultural impacts of the internet on people. And the first thing that they noticed is that they had drastically misjudged their their social value, but also their intellect. Because when you can pick something up and know the answer, you mistake it that you've known the answer, right? And then I think following that down the line, people then put their judgment into it, because that's where they're this is their external brain, and then their external judgment and dissemination of information also now is in that external out that is that hard? Is
No,
that make
yeah.
sense?
Unpack that one a little bit more. So we're talking about, like, when you say cyborgs, are you talking about these like humanoid robot type things?
No, like I already. I mean, me and David don't necessarily agree on this, but I already think we're cybernetic. Just because it's not implanted doesn't mean we're not cyborgs. People. That's why I'm also not so worried about implantation, because people are carrying it around in their cars. There's in their car, tells them where to go, tells them where to get gas, tells them where to get when they need gas, tells them, calls their people from them, tells them when their tires are low, tells them how much mileage they have left. That's just their car. Now add your phone. Your phone tells you where you parked. The phone has told you when your balance is low on your bank account. It tells you everything. That's your decision making. That's your information input. I feel like we are already cyborgs. The good news is we could still unplug.
Well, at least the difference between, so it's not implanted. We've externally planted it onto the device rather than the device being put in our brain, but it's a choice. We can actually still say, I'm not going to use GPS. I'm going to get a paper map and figure out how to get there. I'm not going to use the clock on my laptop to tell me what time it is. I'm going to wear a watch or look at the sun.
There's a catch to this too.
Yeah.
There's a catch here that the government has an avatar of you now. Your mind file, everything you've ever said on the internet is categorized just for you, for use for the future if they ever need to torture you or something. But there's psyops, my friends. There's psyops going on, Lemina. They're so serious. They're designed to upset you. They're designed to make you say things that in anger. And then what happens? Hate speech legislation for the internet. You see how insidious. Also, there's actions. There's covert. There's things going on the internet today, and I think it's extremely dangerous. Having started a podcast, I have people emailing me and sending me, "Oh, you should cover this topic. You should cover that topic." Oh, the Jews, whatever. I'm like, I don't talk about people, religions, and in the Middle East. I live in fucking Canada. Send me a story about Canada, maybe, and I'll talk about it. Or transhumanism. Don't try and lead me down these other freaking roads.
It's so Canadian of you. I can't talk about that. I live in Canada. I don't talk about Canadian things.
Yeah, geopolitics, I do not go there. I have my opinions in my life. But
fair enough. I think the idea is that people are trying to target you or instigate you into saying things.
Yes. So
well, and I would say to those people is that nobody knows what's going on geopolitically. You know what you think's going on based on the commentator that you like. But I suspect, much like Canada, we have no fucking idea what the shitty government's doing. And it's not even about, and I'm not even going to try not to swear, sorry.
Who said you shouldn't?
We're Canadian, you know what I'm saying? Everything we do.
Maybe I need an app for that. But I would say, like, it becomes clearer and clearer as the years go by that all governments in all countries are corrupt and they mislead their people. And so nobody actually knows what's going on in another world. And I guess that's why I've decided to keep the information that I like to talk about more about the individual, because you can guarantee what you think. You can guarantee what you do out in the world. You can make changes in that way. You can take care of the land. You can watch what you eat, and it might not get you through the catastrophe, but it'll sure make you feel better in the meantime, and not in a way that you got a participation trophy, but in the way that you were the best human that you could during a time that was really difficult.
Yeah. So what about the detox element of this now? I mean, I think we've analyzed it, the dangers, the risks, the cautions, and how it's messing with people. Obviously, I think we've come to the conclusion, all three of us, that technology is something rotten with technology.
Well, let me ask you something, David. So something I came across when I was trying to analyze this is really about that decision making being supplanted somewhere else. So you get emails saying, I want you to talk about this. This is going on here. And it's like, well, that person on that other end of the email clearly already knows what they think about that subject. How much more time are they spending?
Often they're topics
Listening
that
to
if I
other
did
people
talk
say
about
this,
them,
saying the same shit over and over again, right? Like,
yeah.
to
My interest is
me-
to help, is to be of some service to humanity, and I don't know how else to do it other than a podcast. And if the COVID tyrants didn't come to my damn town, I wouldn't even be on this podcast.
Yeah.
No. My point of that was this: was that the people that are emailing you to get to talk about a topic, they already know what they think of that topic.
Yeah.
So why do they want to keep hearing the same thing over and over again about a topic? Like,
that's part of the addiction. I think the point maybe the point you're making is one way that we can help to break that addiction is be, instead of passive consumers, be active in using this as a tool to find something that you're looking for, find your answer in a number of different sources, not in just one place, and then walk away. So just like you would have in the past, maybe gone to the bookshelf and grabbed a book off the shelf and searched for the thing that you were looking for. Maybe it was incomplete. You found another book, you read it. And then when you were done with answering that question in your head, you walked out. You didn't stay in the library and see what else was on the shelf, right? You've completed that mental task and you moved on. And I think that if we can start approaching our digital diet in the same meaningful way, in the same purposeful way, I'm going to go and do a thing. So for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to check my email. And when I'm done, I'm done. I mean, this is my big problem is, I have a number of different tabs open, and when I'm done with one, I'll move over to the other one and see what's going on there. And they've done this on purpose, so it's all scrolling down, and there's little red notifications that tell me that something new is happening over there. And then I move on to the next tab, and I go down that rabbit hole there. And hours can go by, and I can convince myself like I've done something. I've actually used my time, but actually I really haven't. I haven't done anything useful in that time.
So I would say one thing, and it might be a bit different, because you are podcasting. So I would say when I hear that, there's a couple of things I think that you could do. One, I think people should not have any notifications on their phone at all. That's Pavlov's dog, right? Like, soon as that dings, you're going. Soon as that rings, you're going. Soon as that vibrates, you're going. And it is in charge of you then, right?
Yeah.
So the only way to take that power back is for it to not have any notifications on, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And then two, I think setting a physical timer could be helpful for somebody. If you are going to do that, and you're going to sit down and work, and part of the internet is part of your work, then you should set a timer for how long you're going to reasonably allow it and what time of day is best for it. Like, I just don't think waking up and people go to their phone first off and they're looking at Facebook and they're looking at, what a shit way to start your day, both for your body and your mind. And same with when you go to sleep. Don't check the news before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we watched a mafia documentary before bed last night. That's a little better, maybe. The Gambino crime family. We watched.
What was that? Was that the one where the mafia got in cahoots with the CIA and then implemented all that? No.
Aren't they all like that?
Isn't it called Operation Gladio?
No, that's a whole nother rabbit hole there.
I just want to highlight this comment from a Collapse Life reader, David Kirtley, who says people live in a curated universe that confirms their own biases.
Yeah, that's right. Echo chambers, right? Echo chambers.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks, David.
I wonder if David would have some input on this. Do you also believe that they live in a curated universe that makes them not have to feel uncomfortable at all times? Like, I feel like we've become soft in a lot of different ways, and our bodies and minds are made for adversity. We have to have these hard things happen to us in order for us to feel okay. And I was thinking about, I told you guys that story of somebody who told me they had really sad feelings because their dad worked. And I told them to get bent in no uncertain terms, like, you're not pulling that on me. And which seems kind of harsh, but is also true. We have to start telling people the truth about their softness. And maybe that does feel hurt when you've always gotten a participation trophy and you've never had to be the only kid on the playground, or somebody didn't tell you you were ugly, or, you've never had anything. Maybe that is really hard. But that's not a case to not have those things happen. It's a case to have those things
Right.
happen. So everything doesn't feel like such a huge infraction. I mean, I guess if
Exactly.
you've never missed a goal in soccer, it's going to be really hard when you get fired from a job.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This goes back to your theory that, the avoidance of death is not the same thing as living. It's the avoidance of pain or discomfort or any kind of suffering does not equal happiness. Real happiness comes from actually facing that adversity and knowing that you found the strength and the tools to be able to overcome it and get stronger from it. That makes someone happy.
Yeah. And
That
I
leads me
wonder
to
about
something my wife said, actually. I was talking to my wife and I was like, about this podcast. So top of the list in both the detox side, right? The good part of this discussion. So she said, just lose your interest. And I was like, interesting. And I said, so tell me more. And she said, take an interest in things that are not on the internet. This sounds easy, but again, you were talking about uncomfortable. You have to become uncomfortable now. The technology is like attached to us. We have to actually go through the difficult step now. Leave the damn thing here longer than 20 minutes. Rake all of the leaves. Then look at the phone later. You understand? So it's going to be uncomfortable for me to resist, to scratch the itch, right?
And again, like
What a
raking leaves
predicament.
is probably not an interest. It's just something you have to do,
Boring.
right? So
Yeah.
we choose the things that we're interested in instead of the things that just have to get done.
And it's hard to make everything a meditation. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, meditation,
But you
raking the
could-
leaves. It's
you-
you can't do that.
You could temptation bundle then. So then in that case, if you're really not that interested in that, maybe that's the only time you allow yourself to use podcasts. Like, I'm sure you guys have heard about temptation bundling. So the only time
Nope.
you're allowed to watch a movie is when you are on that treadmill. The only time you're allowed to, so you put a thing that you don't want to do, but you should do for your well-being, with a thing that you really want to do that's not good for you, and in hopes of finding some sort of, I mean, people are so lazy. I think the thing that they want to do will fall off too, I think you could get some action from some temptation bundling in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah.
So David came back in response to your question, Limina. No, I think what you had asked was, remind me, the way you'd framed it.
Yeah, if people are also doing that because they're just soft now, they want the easy way. And he said, no, they have chosen to just be able to both choose their inputs, but also to be the star character. Look at all the people posting insane performative outrage. Yeah.
And didn't I say digital ego earlier? Look, this comment is like nails what I'm thinking that I can't explain, but I'm just thinking.
Yeah, that's right. The kind of stuff, I'm not on TikTok and I'm very rarely on Instagram, but the kind of stuff that that sometimes passes through from other people sharing it, of like in the wake of the elections this week, for example, conservative people on X are saying, post all the liberal meltdown videos you can find. And I'm sure all of them are performative. I'm sure they're all staged, but it's literally someone sets up her phone on a little stand and, makes sure the light and the framing is correct, hits play, and then starts crying. Oh, I can't believe this is happening. I mean, you have to imagine the steps that it took before that recording started. Then you understand
of bot clickbait too, right? To keep people online. That's not even to bolster anything. That's to keep you online. And, I just think the internet, all as it is now, is advertisement, unless you go on to Tor or something more into the deep web, and even that is being heavily, heavily monitored. So I guess, Greg Carlwood had a great saying on one of the things he did from the Higher Side chats, and he said, "Seek, do not consume." So if you are not looking for something, and in that instance, if you are looking for something, it's somebody else's pain, and maybe you should think about that, even if you don't like them. And two, you should think about, are you seeking out information? No. Then maybe you should go rake some leaves. Maybe you should go rake some leaves and listen to some music or something,
Yeah, yeah. And I wrote down something maybe that's profound. I don't know. The present moment has no ideology. So let's say I go rake the leaves and just think, I don't need to be thinking something, hearing someone's opinion on something to entertain me. Man, just really just rake those leaves and maybe
Or
engage
like a
your five
karma
senses.
yoga.
Like, what does
Yeah,
it smell? What's the smell here? What's the air doing? You could occupy yourself with a million things going on. There's things flying around in the air you could look at. It's like, this is nature here, buddy. Turn that damn thing off.
Rethink your own thoughts. Like, I've heard somewhere that boredom is like the cornerstone of innovation and creation of just having your mind be bored and letting it think stuff. I mean, it's interesting. I'll say something to my niece and she'll be like, "Nobody else thinks that. Nobody else is doing that and thinking what you're thinking." And I'm thinking, yeah, because somebody else always has an input, right? An input.
And we're taking up so much of our brain power trying to retain the things that we're hearing other people say, trying to remember what was that thing that we heard so that I can go and share it to somebody else on my platform so I can get that shared social credit from it. We're not actually freeing up any of our brain energy to actually think our own thoughts and maybe have a completely different take on it. And I think also there's this fear again of a lot of people are afraid to have their own opinion, because what if it's an unpopular opinion, or what if it gets me ostracized, or
doesn't that go back to risk-taking skills, right? Doesn't that go back to risk-taking skills about being responsible for yourself? Because I mean, most of my opinions are super unpopular, and thank goodness I've been wrong enough or stubborn enough that I've either let go of them or stuck by them. But it's when you back to that, having to have experiences, and sometimes adverse experiences, that helps you suss out when to say your opinion and when not to say your opinion, and whether you really believe it enough to put it out there and risk being unpopular. Like, all of those things are interconnected and important in learning the social moderation, which I'm not very good at, I got to be honest. But then also risk taking, and also really like having to go back and reassess what you believe, having to really investigate what you believe. There's so much incorporated in something like that. And then I would say, then there's the physicality of what you're saying, is then you don't have to remember it, you have to share it. So again, you've subcontracted your memory out to your device to get that information to somebody else too.
Yeah. I think the other thing with sharing an opinion that it goes back to David's point is that digital ego, that like the other thing to consider is your opinion on this subject going to add anything here? You don't have to share your opinion. So the counterpoint to I'm afraid to share my opinion is the people who share their opinion all the time on every subject when it isn't even useful or additive. It's just I need to feel better about myself by having something to say about this thing.
What do you guys think of this? The urge to take a photo of every goddamn thing you do to put on the internet. We're building a garage, pretty interesting, pouring concrete, doing cool stuff. And I'm like, oh, should I take a video of this and put on? And I don't do it, so I'm being a good boy in this regard. I'm like, this is just too much freaking work now, okay? Yeah, I can do this and give my stupid opinions and stir up trouble on the internet, which I do like to do. I'm sorry, I like to stir up trouble. But Anyway, yeah. What if
No,
you
it's just putting you on a
to put
hamster wheel
everything
then,
on
because you would take a picture, then you would share it, then you would have to go back and see, did anyone see it? Did anyone
Yeah,
comment on it? How
yeah.
many people liked it?
And then
Maybe
your
I'd have
feelings
to
are
take a
hurt
different
because
picture.
nobody cares about your stupid garage or your carrot hoard this year.
Or somebody's gonna write a comment saying, you don't know how to pour concrete, you're a fucking idiot. You know,
Yeah,
like
that looks
somebody's
terrible.
always gonna do something. It's
Yeah.
interesting to me. I guess I'd like to hear. I've been really, really thinking about this, is that and I call it like the Joe Rogan syndrome in some ways, although, you know, periodically I listen to his podcast too. I had no idea he was even a comedian until 2 years ago. I am so bad at knowing Hollywood or people or whatever. Anyway, but it's interesting to me that nobody trusts themselves or has their own opinion anymore. It's like, oh my gosh, did you see on Joe Rogan, that guy said that those people said that obesity is from food, and it's like, you just believe that now because you saw it on Joe Rogan?
The
Like,
right person
where
repeated it
have
to
you
you.
been for the last 50 years? You know,
Yeah. Or the
Most-
you know, the fact check debunk of something that well, so and so said that wasn't true. So I'm not gonna actually go and do any of my own research to find out if that thing that I heard that I believe is true or not. I'm just gonna take somebody else's word for
or
it.
just believe it. Aren't we just allowed to believe shit? Like,
Well, what
are we
about
just not
logic?
allowed to like believe stuff based on our personality or our own experiences without 1,000 experts and 1,000 researchers and 1,000 commentators? Maybe I just think that because I'm a stubborn, opinionated bitch, which I'm just going to say it before anybody else does, could be totally true. But it's also saved me from a lot of external, like, I will listen. I read a lot of books, you know, think about a lot of things. But it's interesting to me that there's a stopgap there, that until somebody famous says something, or an expert or a journalist writes a book, like, how did that journalist writing a book that's just watched junkies now all of a sudden have all this insight into junkies? Like, good good grief. I mean,
Yeah.
come on,
Yeah.
we all have experiences with humans in our lives, and I think there's just some our personality is such a big part of us, our genetic personality. Of sometimes we're just that way, and we believe that because we're us.
So this is a slightly different topic, but picking up on the Joe Rogan effect. So we got to a stage with mass media where, you know, our attention spans are stripped down to nothing. Like we have, you know, mosquito-like attention where we can only really focus on something for about 9 seconds, and the images have to flash every 3 seconds. Here comes Joe Rogan with his 3-hour conversation where nothing changes. It's just him and the other person sitting in a studio. There's no flashing pictures or anything. And suddenly it's the most popular podcast in the nation. And it requires 3 hours investment. And people are willing to give that. What's going on there? Why can we give 3 hours to listening to Joe Rogan talk to some schlub and not 3 hours to rake the leaves or read a book?
Interesting question. But my first thought, and this might not be the whole thing, but I think I might be on the little nugget of this. 3 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, don't matter. We're addicts now. I don't know. This technology, turn it on and keep it on. If it's a 3-hour podcast, great. I get to have the dopamine that much longer. I don't know. Or not think for myself that much longer. This is my first thought.
Well, I think he does a hell of a podcast.
It's a good podcast, yeah.
Yeah. I think he's really honed it down to an art, and he has some interesting people on there. But would you listen to a 3-hour podcast with the opposing view by the Young Turks?
No. I wouldn't.
So it's
I mean, I rarely listen to the 3 hours with Joe Rogan. I don't know if I would listen to 3 hours of my own podcast.
Have you
Oh,
guys ever gotten through a full Joe Rogan? I got through one
I
with
have.
Graham Hancock. I always get through the whole thing, but nothing
Oh
else.
yeah.
I have.
Anytime
But
I
when I
listen to
listen to
something,
them
I
is when
listen
I'm
to
on a
all of it.
long road trip.
Okay.
That's the only time I can listen to a road, because I don't have 3 hours to sit and do nothing else. And for me, it's hard to listen to his podcast and do something else, unless I'm like maybe cooking or something like that. But I don't even have time to cook for 3 hours anymore.
Anyway, he gets a lot of clicks, but some people might just be there for an hour.
Books. Yeah, I listen to a lot of books, so I'm used to listening to prolonged things. And in fact, I've started buying series so I can have like 46 hours of listening to something, and then I know it's my week. I'm probably
And what else are you
over-listener.
doing when you listen to an audiobook? Do you just sit in a chair and listen to the book, or are you multitasking?
Multitasking, even with podcasts, which I listen very few podcasts now because of all the advertising. And also I find it's the same thing over and over. It's like the vaccines were bad. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I call it the somebody's puked on you experience. Somebody's puked on you. Do you really want to go through and pick out and see what's in it?
Yeah.
I don't. I just want to clean it up, right? So I just feel like people are going over and over. It's like, oh, do you know what else has come out? Do you know what else has come out? And do you know what else has come out? And it's like constantly reigniting everybody's anxiety and like,
and I see a lot of podcasters out there who, these podcasters who regurgitate the same 5 topics constantly. It seems to me sometimes they have no interest either. They're like, okay, today is Zara on the podcast, and there's Lemon over there. Tell me your thing.
Feel like
introduce yourself. Let's talk about the New World Order. It's like, okay, have an interest, dude.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see that. That's just an observation.
So, but when you multitask listening to podcasts or an audiobook, what kinds of tasks is that?
All of it. I can do all of it. For everything from earlier today I was chainsawing down wood or whippersnippering or cooking. We just homemade food here but I was getting, so this is my thing. I was getting to where I couldn't not listen to something even while I was sleeping. It's just another kind. Just because you're not sitting there in front of the screen doesn't mean you're not hooked up. And it was probably about 6 months ago, my husband said, I've been just letting my mind think. No music or nothing. And David and I have been talking about that. And David and I have been kind of challenging ourselves to go back to nothing. And it's pretty good because today, I was out there and I heard a raptor. I think it was probably one of the hawks in the air that I wouldn't have been able to hear had I been listening. And my cat is out and she's not very big.
Yeah.
We forget about those little things we miss out on. But when I'm cooking or whatever, but I've been typically in my life, I've been almost like an information junkie. Like I don't read one book, I read 4 books a week or, things like that. So,
yeah.
Can I bring up childlike wonder here for a moment? Childlike wonder. And
are you doing a better health commercial?
Let me explain this. And I've already described how I struggle with the technology and then going out into my land and doing the gardening and the whole thing. Sometimes I do leave the damn thing there. I really do. And in summer, I'm very busy. I can't even have time to be listening to all these things. So I have to just get out there and work very hard and get things done. And it's just, you throw the damn thing on the ground. It's just wires in the way. So sometimes you just get involved and you freaking do it if something serious is happening. And you know what begins to happen? You're like, look at that little pollinator. I think this is a new one we haven't had here before because our ecosystem is developing on our food forest that we're building. And each year there's different insects, different weeds that somehow find their way in, little critters and crawlers. And you're staring at a flower all of a sudden. And you're like, look at this goddamn thing. And it's like the whole universe opens up. And it's like, I'm in the fucking present moment now.
Yeah.
And there's no ideology there. This is my point for the day. There's no ideology in the present moment. Think about it, people. Contemplate it. It's my life's work to contemplate
I
this now.
I really like what you're saying there, David, because there is something meditative about being in the present, but there's also something about like you go around your piece of property or you're in a park, and as much as they're yelling at climate change, you can see that this piece of land is doing okay, that it might be changing, but it's doing okay, and the natural world is constantly changing. There's something soothing in it, along with all the other physiological, things
There's an
that are.
immersion that can happen with a very short period of time, really. If you just go through the uncomfortable 10 minutes, say, I'm not going to go get that goddamn podcast machine, this phone, because it's going to be in the damn skin soon, people.
Yeah.
We got to figure this out.
I think too that, when if you're outside and doing your tasks outside and you're present, paying attention to the task and to the environment around you, you start to realize that actually you're not alone out there, right? You notice those bugs, you notice the bird and the squirrel and the fox that's actually hiding in the bushes watching you, which if you're not present in that, you're just paying attention to.
And you know what you feel? You feel I belong here.
Yeah.
And it's freaking powerful because we spend so much of our lives thinking, I don't belong here. Who are these people? What are they? Get the vaccine, blah, the whole culture's mad.
I love
the whole culture's,
David.
Go ahead.
I love it.
Yeah.
Because that's part of I think, if I was going to go down a transhuman pathway, I would say the first thing that they would do is tell you you're not part of the natural world and you're already halfway there. And a lot of people believe that. They believe that there's some sort of barricade between them. Like, look at we have to leave the parks natural, which means you can't go there because the government said you can't go there. And it's like, well, wait a second, I am part of the natural world. And then you have these experiences, like this is my FOMO. So me and my husband are hunters. So I've hunted with people who sit and scroll Facebook while we're in the blind or out hunting, and it drives me absolutely batty because you miss out on even more. But I'll tell you this story. My husband was out in the bush and we were hunting and he fell asleep sitting there. And when he woke up, this massive buck was like 5 feet from him and probably a little bit more than that, about 5 meters from him, and probably had been there and had just been quiet when he came in. But then he said, like, he could tell this buck was trying to deke him out to get him to move because their vision is based on movement. And he's like, I had no idea deer did that they would play this deke out game to try and they're moving to try and get you to move. It's almost like was playing this weird game of shadow. And it's like, and lesson learned that deer do that. And lesson learned in the social world about deking somebody out. Sometimes you have to move first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. We got my first comment ever on a live stream here. There was 12 people there, now there's 6. That's pretty cool. Thank you for following along. So somebody, someone named Smostad says Joe Rogan often smokes marijuana and drinks booze with his guests. A poor example for young men who, as Michael Yon has said, and I know who that Michael Yon is, need to be hyper-focused on grounding themselves and facing reality. Hello, good comment. Thank you. I like it.
That's interesting. Stephen Mostad. That's my husband.
Oh,
thanks for watching.
Hey, Stephen. Oh, thanks for watching my channel,
Stephen.
Wow.
Good. That's an interesting. It's an interesting.
Because I'm a marijuana addict. I'll just tell you, I've struggled with marijuana addiction for 25 years, and I still struggle with it. So I know a thing or two about marijuana, and it's not all fun and games, my friends, and I apologize. But an addict is something, we don't need to get into that. But it plays into this conversation, the digital addiction, hey?
Well, no, but I like what you're saying there. And the first thing that came to my mind is, we look at these things, how they're doing the EMF researches. We're just looking at the phone, but we're not looking at the phone plus the Wi-Fi plus your neighbor's Wi-Fi on your body. And it's like, well, and we've talked about this, David, is I'm really worried about this resurgence of psychedelics. Not that I'm a prohibitionist and not that I don't believe that all these medicines have their places, but then we have multi addictions, like they call it poly substance abuse, but
Yeah.
whatever, but poly use. So now we know that these screens are having issues with our brains, and then with our socialization, and then with our personalities, and then with our emotional selves. Now add, we're doing it while we're on marijuana, or
Yeah.
we're doing it after we've done MDMA, or we're doing it while we're eating Doritos and high and doing it. Like, it's just, it seems like the rushing nesting dolls of just asking for trouble. I've got to put this dog out because his nose
I
whining
was
is
wondering. I thought
driving
it
me
was my
crazy.
dog.
Come
Okay, we all got
on.
dogs. So
Oh,
whose dog is that?
it's my puppy. He's just,
Zara. Okay. Let me tell you something about marijuana and video games.
Hold
I'm
on.
an expert in this field. I spent 12 hours smoking weed,
Come
playing
on.
video games every day for a whole month once. That was probably the most extreme I've ever done, because my wife was away for a whole month. And this was probably 5 years ago when I was deep in addiction. I'm much
Yeah.
better now, just so we're clear. I barely touch the stuff. And when my wife catches me, it's not great. So we have a little agreement on this. But no, I'm very well. So don't worry, but I have gone through a very difficult period with marijuana use. And as I told you, I spent a whole month smoking weed 12 hours a day, playing video games 12 hours straight.
Wow.
It's hard to describe what your life is like because you're not there anymore. You are a shell. You're a zombie. And there's there's nothing I can say because there's nothing happening to the human. And people are doing this every freaking day right now.
Yeah.
And the millions of people.
And in Canada, the government is selling it to you.
Yeah.
They're taxing cigarettes so that they are outpriced, that you can't buy them, but they're handing you marijuana in the provincially run dispensaries. I mean, that's not coincidental.
And the
That's not by
transhumanist
accident.
agendas, yeah. And if you get into the government websites and the government data, which I like to do, there's so much information about video games and as a channel to take the culture into the full biodigital convergence.
Yeah.
Which is a scary nightmare. And we do not want to go there. No.
Well, so something that just popped into my mind, just something I haven't really thought about, so impulsively I'm putting it out there, is a bunch of young, a society has never gotten out of this sort of authoritarian without the lives of their young men being laid on the lines. And I think that's historically who fights for the people. But when you've disenfranchised this many young men, I bet you getting them to pretend that they're soldiers and warriors would keep them at bay. No, I think it would be helpful if you were trying to be a dictator and an authoritarian, because it would satiate that warrior impulsive part of them to defend and to lie their lives down and to take that risk and to be, the bodies for which we usually lay our freedoms on, right? They can do it now virtually, so it's satiating another part of these already disenfranchised young men. Just a thought. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying could be relevant, though.
Oh, there's an all-out war on humanity, my friends. Like we looked at psychology, culture, spirituality. We haven't looked at, but that's another nihilistic freaking black hole that I look at a lot on my podcast. Where's the human in all of this that's happening? What is a human? This is my fundamental question I have for the world. And on my podcast, I often ask my guests that question. What does it mean to be a human anymore? What do you think? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that if you were to go to Africa and ask somebody there that question, they would just laugh at you. They would say, "What do you mean? It's not even a question I need to."
Like, what is a woman? Like, what is a woman? They laugh at this question.
Yeah, exactly. Again, maybe that's where the thought came into my mind, because Matt Walsh did that. But it just makes me think, there are people who live their lives still connected to reality. They are born because they have a mother and a father, and they're born of their mother, and they know that their mother is a woman, and they don't have to question those basic fundamentals.
Yeah.
And so when you would try and engage them in a conversation about what does it mean to be human, they would probably have a very simple answer.
I am a human, they would say.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and
I'm a
you
human.
know, the things that are natural instincts for us to feed ourselves and to clothe ourselves and to find love and to have a family, whether that's, you know, the family that you have or the family that you find, but all of those things that have now in our culture, in our Western culture, become items to be mocked.
Yeah, I connect this to the really close family just of Africans. I've worked with a lot of Africans, and they're such happy people. Oh my God. And they have big, close families, lots of touch, you know, like the carry the baby around. I mean, maybe I've just seen too many pictures. I don't know. I'm not speaking. I don't know about Africa people, whatever. But let's be honest. Yeah, there's a lot of smiling people. I've met African people from Africa. They're smiling, and it's like, why are they so happy? Why are we all so freaking depressed over here? It's because the family's been destroyed, and this is part of the agenda.
Yeah, that is part of the agenda.
I
Yes,
wonder
it
if
is.
we've just got too much time on our hands, right? You know, 100 years ago, you were fighting to keep you and your kids alive, and you didn't have time to think about whether you thought you were an adult baby or maybe a furry in your sex life, right? You were just trying not to starve to death, and
Yeah.
I just wonder if
That's it.
going back and doing even if you don't have to, if the idea of raking leaves is so important just because work is important, having physical things you
Yeah.
need to do to sustain yourself, real or imagined, we need to take those things back as part of us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
finish the rake. I did finish the raking today without listening to the
Good.
podcast, just for the record. Because
Well,
like I
good
said,
for
the
you.
wires get in the way of when you're doing the wires.
Yeah.
And it's like, just whatever, I got to work here. So maybe that's good. The work can take over, but you got to get into work. And as my wife said, lose your interest in the internet. Find an interest in something not in the internet. Simplicity, people. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That's it.
Especially if you tend to have that compulsive type of a personality, just find something healthy to be compulsive about, or
Yeah.
something something analog. I mean, it's not as easy as that. It's not just do that, but it's a path. It's a strategy.
I worry about inner city people, big cities, people in inner city. And Limina's got a lot of answers to this dilemma, and I have zero, because I think that if I was in a city, I'd be getting the hell out, and that's where I am with everything right now. But Limina's more thinking, no, there's lots you can do in the city to prepare, to be resilient, to be strong, to educate yourself, to become a greater person. And I'm thinking, if I was in a city, I would crumble. But I'm a rural Canadian. I got to be out here in the woods. Go ahead. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah. We just moved out of the city, and I think the one thing that I found is hard is that, and I'm not very patient in that way, is that it's other people's ineptitude becomes your problem because they're just too close, and communities are no longer built on shared values. And so
Yes.
you have people who don't share values that are inept, incapable, and too close. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I think there's people far better than me to talk about how to get by with that. But in terms of the natural world and food gathering, and guerrilla gardening, I think there's actually quite a bit you can do. And if you are in the city, skill building and trading for people, trading your skills and abilities for people who are rural that can grow food is a great first strategy.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you that other people's ineptitude become your problem when you live in a city, which you can just completely avoid when you're not in a city.
Yeah. But it gets funny now too, because I'm like basically a hermit for the past 4 years, because with COVID, like I was a chef and that's finished. I'm not going back. So my wife said, you're gonna build a homestead. That's what you're gonna do. I was like, okay. And I did. But what was my point? Now it's hard for me to re-socialize, especially now with the COVIDians everywhere and the crazy culture, and then there's a transgender people running around. It's like, even in my small town, and like I'm seeing the cyberpunk dystopia is here, and I'm like, no, I can't even deal with it anymore. But anyway, That's my problem.
Well, I would think two things. One, we're overly socialized in the first place, even within our families. People, again, up until like even 70 years ago, you didn't go to your parents' house every year for Christmas and did all this traveling and insisted you spent every holiday with each other all the time, being happy and giving gifts, right? Like it was like, yeah, that's my folks. They're over there. They're too far away to go, that sort of thing. Two, I would say socialization ramps down as you get older, and there is a reason why we have the myths of the crone and the magician. You like Lord of the Rings. It's
Love
always
it.
the old guy with the hat out in the bush by himself, and that's because as you get older, you take your wisdom and collect it, and your knowledge, and you collect it, but you go off by yourself. You don't need as much from the society,
Yeah,
but what
I
it
really
also
don't.
does is forces the young people that need something from you to go through the trials to get to you, right?
Mm,
Otherwise, they just get free information and help all the time, which is actually where we're at right now.
Good point.
Oh, should we end there, guys? This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, good discussion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a big issue, eh? Jeez,
It is.
This technology, it's all encompassing, man. It's getting into
I think-
reproduction. Like the human beings are going to be born in a freaking test tube by 2030. Mark my words. It'll be
Well,
illegal
they're
to have
already-
a baby.
I
in
think
any
they
other
already
way.
are.
Yeah,
already
yeah. Oh, yeah.
conceived. I think the number one thing people could do for themselves is take apps and notifications off their phone and just start by laying down some boundaries about that you are in charge. And then just start when you go to the store, don't take it with you.
Yeah,
Here's
don't
the
take it.
biggest thing. Maybe just don't take your phone with you when you go to the bathroom.
And erase this thing from your mind. But what if something happens? What if I get a flat tire? What if I have a car breakdown? How can I call anybody? Delete this type of talk, and we got to turn back the clock. I think turn back the clock a little. That's what we try to do here. It's like when someone comes to my property sometimes and they look around, it's like, holy Jesus, what are you guys doing here? This is awesome, because we do have a beautiful place now. 5 years of construction of a homestead, imagine it. And I say, welcome to 1850.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I say to people. This is how we want to experience our life psychologically, not this 2024 stuff. No, thank you.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So I think I like what you're saying. I wonder, I'm not as social neither. I'm way older than, well, not way older. I'm older than you. But I do think that people like us who are doing that, and like Zara, we do need to make space, particularly I think, to have young people around, even if it's for a short amount of time. And I think it's okay to insist, even have negative words with people, to say, insist that hey, when you come into this house, phone's at the door, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's okay to say to young people, it's like, if we're going out for dinner, you don't need to have your phone, just leave it in the car, and then you won't feel compelled to, right? Things like that. And insist that. The other thing I think that's really affecting us is people not disseminating, like having really hard conversations by text. Don't do that. The least we could do is pick up and call people, right?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Especially for hard things. So yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I have my phone. I listen to a lot of things, but I didn't have the internet for all last month, and it didn't really bother me.
How
Well,
lucky.
maybe my final thought would be this, and it just came up, and I'm writing it down as I'm saying it. If we want to resist tyranny, which is what I think everybody has always done, resist technology. That's my final message. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
I mean,
Or
some
just-
technology, electric toothbrush, okay, fine.
Control technology. Don't let
Yeah,
it control you.
Yes.
Right. I
yes.
don't know. I mean, you can become a hermit and live completely off the grid and technology free, but there are some benefits to it. But just make sure that you are the one in control and that it's not controlling you. That would be my final thought.
Yeah, that's huge. That's the whole nugget, isn't it? Really.
Well, you know
Take
what I'm
charge.
thinking, as you say that, Zara, I'm thinking of, would you let if you were in a relationship with somebody, would you let it boss you around every single time it dings? Like, I need something now. I need something now. You need to answer me now. I want this now. And I'm going to take control of your finances, and I'm going to take control of your communication, and I'm going to take control of your day and your memory and everything like that. You would never have a relationship with a person like that. And so maybe putting some of the boundaries and starting to think about it like that is like, is this relationship lopsided? Is the technology in my life in control of me? And if it is, how do I take that control back?
Yeah, healthy boundaries. People understand that with people. That's a good one. That's a very good one. Healthy boundaries with technology. Love it.
Yeah. I think the analogy of thinking about it like a diet, like food consumption. And so how much of it are you consuming, and are you consuming healthy things or processed things or, junk things? Thinking of it in that terms, I also is, I think, really useful, because we're so versed in thinking through what we eat. So this is the same kind of thing. It's the food for our mind.
Knowing when you're full up, right? Like, if you already know what you think, you don't need to listen to 20 commentators for 5 hours each on what they think, which is the exact same thing as what you think.
And take a caring attitude. Take a caring attitude towards yourself. Take a caring attitude towards your mind. I described looking at a flower. Looking at a flower and having my mind blown. It's a wonderful feeling.
Oh, I watched
try it. See if you can do that. Anyway,
I watched this bee today, and it's a miracle. It's a miracle what is out there, and that things have happened, and that we've been able to live this long as part of it. And as I just think, let's FOMO the real world. We should have fear of missing out in the corporeal world. Let's bring FOMO back, of actually missing out on things happening
that are real.
in the real world.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. I hope that we get to meet in the corporeal world at some point. That would be great. But in the meantime,
I'd love to have you up, Zara.
I would love that. Maybe we'll come skiing.
Alberta's the last holdout for Canada too.
That's
you might be seeing me out there very soon, getting the hell out of this tyrannical province.
The talk of separating here right now is amazing.
I know, and that's another podcast for another day. I want to have it. I don't like this talk. If Canada breaks in half, what's going to happen to the Maritimes?
You're in the wrong half. That's the problem.
Yeah,
You'd love it if you were on the other side.
I'm deeply concerned about this talk. I don't want to be left out here for the Americans. Whatever.
All right, guys. Well,
Zara, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you both. And until we get to meet in the corporeal world, let's keep in touch in the digital world.
Yes.
Take care.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.